The most expensive spice in the world grows from a bulb the size of a marble. You plant it in September. You mostly ignore it. A 4x4 raised bed produces enough to last your family a full year. That spice is #1 on this list. And before we're done, a berry the U.S. government banned for 100 years is now legal in most states. And almost no one is growing it yet. A plant that cost more than opium in 1657. A tree the Roman Empire ran on that you can keep in a pot on your porch. All of it. Small yard. No experience. Real savings. You've stood in the produce section and watched a number you couldn't argue with. Grocery prices have risen 25% since 2020. Fresh herbs, berries, specialty items faster than that. And the standard advice: buy store brand. Clip coupons. Doesn't touch this problem. Here's what that advice never tells you. If you have any outdoor space at all, a small yard, a sunny porch, a raised bed, you are sitting on a solution that your grandmother's generation used every day, and that we quietly abandoned when supermarkets made buying faster than growing. The plants on this list are not exotic. They don't need much space. They need maybe 30 minutes of your time, once a year, once they're established. But every one of them is either expensive at your grocery store, hard to find, or completely unavailable at any price. Today that changes. 2 things I want you to remember as we go through this. Plant number 8. In 1911, the U.S. federal government banned this berry. Not for safety. Because a timber lobby paid for it. The ban lasted nearly 100 years. It has been lifted. The berry produces 10 pounds per bush in zones 3 through 7. Almost no one in America is growing it yet. And plant number 1. The most expensive spice in the world. By weight. $11 for less than 2 grams at Walmart right now. Over $3,000 a pound. It comes from a small purple flower that blooms in October. You plant the bulb in September. I'll show you exactly what to buy, when to plant it, and what the math looks like by year 3. Both plants are in this video. Let's start with number 10. Plant number 10. Turkish Bay Laurel. The tree that pays for 30 years. McCormick Bay leaves at Walmart. $4.99 for 5 dried leaves. Those leaves were harvested 2 to 4 years ago. Here is what that means chemically. Fresh Bay contains eugenol and linalool. Aromatic compounds responsible for its flavor and documented anti-inflammatory properties in peer-reviewed research. Dried bay loses 60 to 80% of these volatiles within 18 months of processing. What you're buying in that jar is a shadow of what fresh bay actually does in a dish. The Romans crowned emperors with bay laurel, not as ceremony, because every Roman kitchen depended on fresh leaves. The word baccalaureate, the degree you earn at graduation, comes from baccalaureus, the berry of the laurel. Academic achievement was symbolized by this plant because this plant symbolized civilization itself. The Pilgrims brought bay laurel cuttings in 1620. It grew in American kitchen gardens through the 1800s. Then spice jars got cheaper than growing. And the tree quietly left American porches. Here's what most people don't know. Bay is a container plant. Slow growing, yes, but in a large pot, manageable indefinitely. Zone 8 and above, outside year-round. Zone 4 through 7. Bring it in for winter, 1 large pot. Harvest fresh leaves anytime. $15 at a local nursery. Fresh bay leaves for 30 years. At $5 a jar, 6 jars a year. That's $900 from a plant you water occasionally and mostly ignore. That's plant 10. Plant 9 produces more food per square foot than the tomatoes most people plant instead, and disappeared from American gardens within living memory. Plant number 9. Ground cherry, husk cherry. The candy that grows on a bush, $6 to $8 a pint at specialty stores. At Kroger or Walmart, essentially never in stock. Thomas Jefferson grew ground cherries at Monticello. They were standard in American kitchen gardens through the 1930s. More Americans tasted ground cherries 150 years ago than taste them today. Then commercial tomato farming expanded. Seed catalogs simplified toward what was selling. And ground cherries fell out of the American home garden. Not because anyone chose to remove them, but because within one generation, no one was asking for them. The flavor is nothing like a tomato. Caramel, vanilla, slightly tropical. They drop from the plant wrapped in a papery husk when ripe. You don't harvest them. You collect them off the ground, nutritionally. Ground cherries contain withanalydes, the same class of bioactive compounds found in ashwagandha, studied for their anti-inflammatory and antioxidant activity. They are not a supplement. They are fruit that happens to contain them. Same family as tomatoes. Same care. Each plant produces dozens of fruit over the season. They self-seed aggressively. Plant once and they often return next year without help. Grow it exactly like a tomato. Start indoors 6 weeks before last frost. Transplant after your zone's frost-free date. Full sun. Moderate water. Container-friendly, your 5-gallon pot works well. Each plant produces continuously from midsummer through fall. $3 seed packet. $20 to $30 in pint equivalent value per plant per season. A fruit that tastes like nothing at any grocery store because no grocery store has ever been able to stock it. It doesn't survive shipping. The only way to taste what Thomas Jefferson ate at Monticello is to grow it in your own backyard. That's plant 9. Plant 8 has a story involving the U.S. government, the timber industry, and a 100-year ban. Plant number 8, black currant. The Berry America banned for 100 years. In 1911, the U.S. federal government banned the cultivation of black currants, not because they were dangerous, because black currants can host white pine blister rust, a fungal disease. And the American timber industry successfully lobbied for a federal eradication order to protect its white pine profits. That ban lasted nearly 100 years in most states, which is why your grandmother didn't grow black currants, which is why you have never seen them fresh at any grocery store, which is why most Americans have no idea what they taste like, even though black currant is the most popular cordial flavor in England. And has been for centuries. The ban has been lifted in most states. Check your state before planting. A few still restrict it, but in most of the country, legal. Available. Almost no one growing it yet. Here is what you have been missing. Black currants contain 4 times the vitamin C of oranges by weight. More specifically, they're anthocyanins. The same class of polyphenols found in expensive blueberry and berry supplements have been the subject of hundreds of peer-reviewed studies on cardiovascular protection and anti-inflammatory response. The University of Otago published a landmark study in 2017 showing that New Zealand blackcurrant extract significantly improved blood flow and reduced arterial stiffness in healthy adults within 2 hours of consumption. This is not a folk remedy. It is a berry with serious nutritional science behind it that America has not been able to grow or buy for a century. Zone 3 through 7. Self-fertile. One plant produces fruit. 5 to 10 pounds per bush. Year 2 or 3. $15 bush. 30 years of production. That's plant 8. Plant number 7. Multiplying onion / potato onion. The onion that never needs replanting. Onions at Kroger, $1.50 to $2 a pound. Every household, every week. One of those costs so constant we stopped noticing it. Before commercial hybrid onions arrived, virtually every American homestead grew multiplying onions. Here's how they work. You plant one bulb. Underground, it divides into 6 to 8 bulbs over the season. Harvest most? Leave a few in the ground. The following year, those bulbs divide again. The bed produces indefinitely. Without replanting. Without purchasing new stock. Without doing anything except harvesting. This variety nearly went extinct when supermarket onions became available for under $2 a pound. The economic argument for growing your own collapsed. People stopped. The variety dropped from mainstream catalogs. Within 2 generations, most American gardeners had never heard of it. The math now looks different. A family of 4 uses roughly 30 pounds of onions a year at $1.75 a pound. That's $52 annually. And that number has risen every year since 2020. Nutritionally, multiplying onions belong to the same allium family studied extensively for quercetin and organosulfur compounds. The bioactive components behind garlic and onions documented cardiovascular and anti-inflammatory effects. Fresh alliums. Not dried. Not supplements. Grown in your yard. $12 starter set. Zone 3 through 9. 6 inches apart. No special care. Self-sustaining harvest. Indefinitely. That's plant 7. Plant 6 was documented as worth more than opium on a 17th century commodity exchange. That is not a metaphor. Plant number 6. Rhubarb. The plant that outpriced opium. Rhubarb at Kroger. $3.99 a pound. Spring only. Often unavailable for months with no explanation. In 1542, rhubarb root was listed on the London Commodity Exchange at 10 times the price of cinnamon. In the 1650s, it sold for more than opium by weight. Documented in merchant records of the spice trade. Shakespeare mentioned it in Macbeth. In 1657, Tsar Alexis of Russia established a state monopoly on all rhubarb entering Europe from China. He controlled the supply. He set the price. By 1900, it had traveled from the courts of Russia to the kitchen gardens of ordinary American families. By 1970, nearly gone. Not because it became difficult, because tropical fruit became available year-round. And rhubarb's brief spring window seemed like a limitation. Modern nutritional analysis confirms rhubarb stalks are high in vitamin K, calcium, and fiber, with quercetin and other polyphenols linked in clinical research to reduced oxidative stress markers. It is not a medicine. It is a perennial vegetable that happens to contain compounds most people are currently buying in supplement form. The crown divides every 5 years. 1 becomes 4. 4 becomes 16. You end up giving them to neighbors. Zone 3 through 8. $9 for a crown. Leaves toxic. Harvest stalks only. That is the one thing to know. Everything else about rhubarb is about as close to a permanent food source as a garden offers. It does not ask for much. It just comes back. First harvest in year 2. Harvest lightly the first time. By year 3, full production, free food for 20 or more years. From a $9 investment made once, that's plant 6. Plant 5 does something no other plant on this list does. It replants itself. Plant number 5. Egyptian walking onion. The onion that plants itself. Green onions at Kroger, $1.29 a bunch. Wilts in 5 days. Buy again next week. 52 weeks a year. The walking onion does something no other plant on this list does. It replants itself. Each plant produces small bulblets at the top of its stalk. When the stalk gets heavy, it bends, touches the ground, and those bulblets root exactly where they land. The plant moves a few inches per year, expanding across whatever space you allow. A viewer in Minnesota planted a handful of bulblets 3 years ago. She now has a 15-foot patch. She has not replanted a single bulb. Documented in American seed catalogs since the early 1800s. Pioneer Homestead standard precisely because of this behavior. Once established, it required nothing. No replanting, no new stock, no seasonal prep. It dropped from catalogs when commercial scallions became cheap. The plant never went anywhere. Just the knowledge of it. Alliums as a food group have been the subject of consistent nutritional research for decades. Walking onions, being a perennial allium with continuous fresh harvest, give you maximum quercetin and flavonoid content at the peak of freshness, which is exactly when those compounds are most bioavailable. Fresh cut, not stored, not dried, not shipped. There is no supplement version of that. Zone 3 through 9. Hardy enough to survive winters that kill other alliums. Green tops harvestable all season. Bulbs in fall. Leave some in the ground. Walk away. $8 for a starter set. At $1.29 a week on scallions. Payback in 7 weeks. After that, unlimited green onions. Indefinitely. From a bed that moves, expands, and manages itself. That's plant 5. 5 plants. A tree that outlives your mortgage. A berry the government banned. Now legal and almost unplanted. A Victorian herb worth more than opium. An onion that pays for itself in 7 weeks. A green that walks across your garden on its own. Look at what you've been spending on these things. Now look at what it would cost to grow them. That gap is real money. Every month, every year, and every year you wait, the grocery store price goes up while the cost of growing stays exactly the same. If you want to be part of a community that's choosing food independence over grocery dependence, subscribe. That is exactly what this channel is about. New video every week. Drop a comment right now. Which of these first 5 are you planting first? Tell me your hardiness zone, and I'll reply with the exact variety for your climate. Plant number 4. 99% of the artichokes sold in America come from a single county in California. Here's why that's your problem and what you can do about it. Plant number 4. Artichoke, the plant 99% of America buys from one county. Artichokes at Kroger, $2.99 to $3.99 each. In season, sometimes unavailable for weeks with no warning. Here is the reason. 99% of American artichokes come from Monterey County, California. One county, one supply chain. When that chain hiccups, bad weather, a labor dispute, logistics, the price spikes, or the shelf sits empty, and you have zero control over either outcome. Artichokes were in Victorian kitchen gardens across America. Catherine de' Medici brought them from Italy to France in 1533. Marilyn Monroe was crowned Artichoke Queen of Castroville in 1948. By 1960, home growing was largely abandoned. The commercial supply had made it seem unnecessary. It wasn't unnecessary. It was a mistake. Modern nutritional research shows artichokes contain cynarin, the compound that stimulates bile production, supports liver function, and improves cholesterol metabolism. A 2018 meta-analysis in the Journal of Dietary Supplements confirmed significant LDL reduction in participants consuming artichoke leaf extract. This is not folk medicine. It is documented by clinical research, and the whole vegetable contains the same compound. Zone 7 through 11, perennial, 5+ years. Zone 5 and 6. Possible with heavy mulching. Not guaranteed. Be prepared. Zone 4 and below. Large container, brought inside. One plant, 6 to 8 artichokes per season. Plant in spring. First harvest that fall or the following spring. $10 a plant. Payback at first harvest. After year 1. Free artichokes from a plant that also provides the architectural showpiece of any backyard garden. 5 feet tall, silver green leaves, dramatic presence, built-in conversation about the supply chain problem you just solved. That's plant 4. Plant 3 was pulled from American nurseries in the 1940s and has been producing buckets of cherries in obscurity ever since. Plant number 3. Nanking cherry / bush cherry. The cherry that produces by the bucketful. Fresh cherries at Kroger. $5.99 to $7.99 a pound. Available 6 to 8 weeks per year. Nanking cherry was introduced to the U.S. in 1882. Sold in American nurseries widely through the 1930s. Utah State University Extension documented yields of 15 to 50 pounds per bush per season. Not 15 to 50 pounds over the life of the plant. Per season? Per bush. Then commercial sweet cherry farming scaled. Large, uniform supermarket cherries got cheap enough. Nurseries stopped stocking the Nanking within a generation. Gone from the American home garden for 80 years. We have been buying expensive cherries for 6 weeks a year, when we could have been harvesting them by the bucket. Beyond yield. Cherries contain cyanidin-3 glucoside, the anthocyanin compound most concentrated in tart cherry varieties, associated in peer-reviewed research with reduced muscle inflammation, improved sleep quality via melatonin pathway support, and markers of cardiovascular health. The Nanking is a tart variety. It contains these compounds in exactly the concentration studied. Bush form. Zone 2 through 7. Handles temperatures that kill most fruit trees outright. Cross-pollination required. Plant 2 bushes, 6 to 10 feet apart. Flowers in early spring before the leaves. Spectacular. Produces year 2 to 3. Lives 50 years. The fruit is small, about ½ an inch in diameter. Tart sweet. Perfect for jam, pies, syrups, or fresh eating. Because Nanking is a tart variety. It sits at the high end of the cherry anthocyanin spectrum. The same range studied at Michigan State University for anti-inflammatory markers and uric acid reduction. 2 bushes, $30 to $40. Full production by year 3. 50 years of cherry harvests from a plant that also flowers more beautifully in March than anything else in a small backyard. That's plant 3. Plant 2 cannot be found at any grocery store. Not in fresh form, not in dried form, not as a convenient substitute for anything. The only way to have it is to grow it. Plant number 2. Sorrel. The green you can't buy anywhere. $5 to $8 a bunch at specialty stores. When available? At Kroger, Walmart, or Target. Essentially never. There is no dried sorrel. No frozen sorrel. No substitute that does what fresh sorrel does. If you want it, you grow it. Or you do without. Standard in American kitchen gardens through the 1940s. Standard in French household gardens for centuries. Then iceberg lettuce arrived, catalogs simplified, and sorrel quietly vanished from American home growing. The loop that formed nobody buying seeds meant nurseries stopped stocking them. No stocking meant no growing. No growing meant no one thought to buy seeds. The loop closed in a single generation, not because the plant became difficult, because the knowledge stopped passing down. Nutritionally, sorrel is one of the highest dietary sources of oxalic acid and vitamin C in the leafy green category, alongside concentrated levels of rutin, a flavonoid studied for capillary strength and anti-inflammatory response. It is the same compound found in buckwheat, currently sold in supplement form for vascular support. Here it is in a perennial plant that returns to your garden every spring. Zone 3 through 7. First harvest 6 to 8 weeks from seed. Grows in partial shade. Useful in smaller yards. $4 plant. $3 seed packet. Fresh sorrel every spring. For years. A green your grocery store has never offered you. Because it bruises before it reaches the shelf. The only way to have it is to grow it. That's plant 2. Plant number 1, saffron crocus. The $3,200 a pound spice in a raised bed. At Walmart right now, McCormick saffron, $10.99 for 1.7 grams. By the ounce. Over $180. By the pound. Over $3,000. Iranian grade. $15 to $20 per gram. $7,000 a pound. The most expensive spice in the world by weight. For centuries. Here is where it comes from. Saffron is the dried stigma of Crocus sativus. Each flower produces exactly 3. Harvested by hand. The morning the flower opens, 1 gram of dried saffron requires 150 to 200 individual flowers. That is why it costs what it costs. The town of Saffron Walden in Essex, England was named for the saffron fields surrounding it. The entire region grew saffron commercially for 3 centuries. A pilgrim returning from the Crusades in the 14th century reportedly smuggled a single corm home inside a hollow walking staff. Possession of the living plant outside Persia was punishable by death. He took that risk because the plant was worth it. American colonists grew saffron. A 1730 colonial export record shows saffron shipped from Pennsylvania to England and the West Indies. It was a cash crop. Pennsylvania Dutch communities cultivated it through the 1800s. Then global trade made imported saffron cheap enough. And Americans forgot they had ever grown it themselves. Modern phytochemical research confirms saffron's active compounds, crocin, quercetin, and saffronol, have been studied in over 50 randomized clinical trials. A 2019 meta-analysis in the Journal of Integrative Medicine found crocin supplementation significantly reduced inflammatory markers and oxidative stress indicators. A 2020 study in nutrients confirmed improvements in cognitive function and mood in healthy adults. The compounds are in the spice you already cook with, not in a supplement, in the spice itself. The spice you're currently paying $3,000 a pound for. Now here is the growing reality. You plant the corms in August or September, 4 inches deep, 6 inches apart. They flower in October and November. Sometimes through the first snow, small purple flowers from frozen ground, which is one of the more unlikely things a garden produces. The morning a flower opens, you harvest the 3 red stigmas. Dry them for 24 hours. Store in a small sealed glass jar. A 4x4 raised bed holds 50 corms. 50 corms, $30 to $40. Year 1. 1 to 2 grams of dried saffron. At Walmart prices, $10 to $20 worth. Here is what changes the math. The corms multiply underground on their own. Each corm produces 2 to 3 new corms per year. By year 3, your 50 have become 150. By year 5, 3 to 4 grams per season, $30 to $45 in value. From an investment of $35 that now costs nothing to maintain. Zone 6 through 9, outdoors, no special care. Zone 4 and 5, plant deeply, heavy mulch. Possible, but not guaranteed. I won't tell you otherwise. Zone 3 and below, containers brought inside before hard freeze. The leaves emerge in winter. The flowers come in fall. The entire cycle runs opposite to almost every other garden plant. Which means your garden produces something in October and November when everything else is finished. The most expensive spice in the world. In a 4x4 raised bed. From corms you plant once in September and mostly leave alone. A man smuggled one of these home at risk of death. Your great-grandmother's generation paid cash money for a spice that traveled thousands of miles to reach them. Her great-grandmother walked outside and picked it. That option never stopped being available. Nobody told you. 10 plants. Not one requires a large yard. Not one requires gardening experience. Not one will ask more than an hour of your time per year once it is established. For the person who just got their first outdoor space, who looked at the yard last weekend and thought, I should do something with this. 1 container of bay laurel by the door. 1 saffron corm in a raised bed this September. A handful of walking onion sets in any open corner. Start there. For anyone who has been gardening for years but still buying all of these things at the store, you already know how to grow things. You just didn't have this list. And for anyone who has stood in the produce section and felt that particular frustration, the number you couldn't argue with. The total that kept growing while your budget didn't. This is what you can do about it. Not all of it at once. Not perfectly. 1 plant. 1 raised bed. 1 September. People who grow their own food are not doing something difficult. They are doing something that was completely normal 1 generation ago. Before we were told that buying was easier, buying is easier for 1 grocery trip. The garden is easier for the next 20 years. If that is the kind of gardener you want to become, someone who chooses food independence over food dependence, subscribe. That is exactly what this channel is about. I will see you in the next one.